Up until now, we've only seen HTML, CSS, some basic JavaScript, and have only made static websites with some styles and not even any functionality actually. We've been doing JavaScript separately from the web, but today we will be doing the application programming interface or API, which would basically necessitate marrying the two concepts together and putting JavaScript, HTML, and CSS together, albeit in different files, but with combined functionality. And all of that will be done by utilizing the API functionality. So even though the name Application Programming Interface or API seems fairly complex, in practice it really isn't. It's simply a way for two or more computer programs to communicate with each other. It's simply a type of software, well, quote unquote, interface, offering a service to other pieces of software. What this means in layman's terms basically is that from a JavaScript file we could make a request to a certain website or an API provider, so to say, usually a backend application, asking for access to some data and either returning the data with a positive response, meaning we're allowed to access the data, or getting the error message with unauthorized access, maybe a bad request, or something similar. So to simply start off with it, first I'll open the Chrome browser and I'll go to the website, and let me just zoom first. Go to the website and show you what it is about. So this one is called JSON type code, I think. It's this one, and I'll link it in the description below. So free fake API for testing and prototyping. Well, learning as well falls under the same umbrella. Powered by JSON server, which is an npm package, but more on that another time. Okay, so here in the tried section we actually get some code, JavaScript, valid JavaScript code, which we can copy and paste in our application and use it as a jumping off point. We can also run the script as well and see what we get. Also, first let me just paste this here. But when it comes to the APIs, this URL here is particularly interesting because we can also just open a new tab and go there right away. And this is what we get. Basically, by making this call with the fetch here, we're asking for that same data, and this is the piece of data that we will be getting back if everything executes successfully. And it's simply an object with 4 properties here. 2 are numbers, this is a string, and a boolean in the end. So a fairly simple API or data point, so to say. The way these URLs also work, and the way APIs are built generally, is that this number 1 here in the URL is what we would consider a dynamic ID. So by removing the number 1 here and this slash as well, because we don't need it, and going to this here URL actually gives us an array with all of the users. Well, I'm assuming they're users, because no, with all the to-dos in an array, and there's quite a bit of them, like 200. If we ever made a request, let's say from our application, getting 200 points, different points of data would be, well, too much. So developers usually limit them to, let's just say, a maximum of 50. And once we basically scroll down and see everything, we make another request for 50 more until the end. But let's not get carried away with that. Let's just test all of this here. So if I were given a similar thing to do at work or even as a hobby, the first thing I would do is take this function, which I've been so generously given, and turn it into something more general. Let's say get data with a URL here, and this is what we will be returning. Now, one thing I forgot to mention during the function video is that there are two different types of functions. On the global, we have synchronous functions, which generally execute line by line, and we have asynchronous functions, which we get by adding the word async here in front of it. And the syntax changes quite a bit. So instead of having this .then syntax, we'll be having something else. Whereas, since we have the async here, there's another keyword I'm allowed to use in tandem with it, and that's await. It's simply a more developer friendly or more human readable way of writing the .thens. So this is the first await data. This will be this response.json. In the end, we'll also wrap this in a try-catch block to catch any errors, if any are potentially found. And I'll simply console.log. Encountered the following error. Actually, let's put it in this. And I'll stringify the error and present it as a string completely. In the end, if the try block is executed successfully, we would like to return the data. Now everything should be working fine. I hope. So instead of this thing here, we'll add the URL and execute the function here. I'm really not sure why this is never read, because I'm returning it here. Oh well. We'll see soon enough. Now we'll run this. If the terminal decides to. The fetch API is an experimental feature. This feature could change at any time. Okay, data is not defined. Is it this thing? Huh. Okay. In that case, how about we extract this from the try block simply and not worry about that. some problems with the fetch API. Okay, so it turns out that fetch is experimental when used with Node.js and is more recommended to be used on the front end in the browser directly. So just to make sure everything works, I'll try to log data from getData as a console log here and run this. Okay, data from getData. Okay, so we do have some information here, and turns out it's the one for that previous link here. Now if we scroll down here, we also have more resources than just like to-dos. We have users, photos, albums, comments, and posts. So all of that can be used for like practicing and creating one's own API system, so to speak. But okay, since there are problems here with Node.js, I'll simply remove this. The next order of business is to actually create an index.html file and add the JavaScript code in here. So in our case, I'll just let's see which pieces of data we have. I'll copy this and I'll put it here as a comment. So I'll have a let's say a section here and 4 divs. So I'll have one with the user ID. I'll have one with the ID, one with the title, and I'll make them all IDs so they're easier to work with in JavaScript, and complete it. So now with these 4 divs, we can simply populate the data by using JavaScript. But in order for that to happen, we have to add a script tag with a source, and I'll make it index.js here. Okay. And in index.js, I'll create a function called populate data. So I'll grab all of these here and I'll use them for getting the elements. To get elements from the HTML inside JavaScript, we can say document dot in our case, since we gave them IDs, we'll do get element by ID. This is user ID. The same thing here, element by ID, and the same for these two as well. Actually, I'll copy this and change them. Now, once we have the information here, I'll actually move this data here, and since this function is asynchronous and returns a promise, the populate data function also has to be asynchronous, and so that we can await the information we get from here. And in the end, once everything works, actually I'm not gonna put a try catch block here, I'll simply say user ID dot I think it was inner text is equal to new data dot user ID. Yeah, these are the props here. So now id dot inner text new data dot ID. Then we have title and completed. I'll save this. Okay, having done this, I'll simply drag my index.html here, go inside. Of course, we don't have anything since I have to execute the function populate data. Also, I don't know if I have to do anything else here. I'll actually log new data and populate data. And I'll open up the dev tools and put them down here. Once we refresh, we actually I'll do this instead. Put them in their own template literals, just to mark everything correctly. We can also do something else, something interesting, and put actual text inside, which will be overridden once once the code has been fetched by the API. And to simulate this, I'll put the slow 3G here for the network and throttle our bandwidth a little bit. So everything's loading here, and once it's been loaded, it populates perfectly. Let's see again. Perfect, so here it is. 2.03 seconds. That's fairly slow, and if we got such a response, such a result at work, they would probably make us work overtime to take care of it, but this has just been throttling. Without any throttling, it's basically immediate. All in all, APIs come in all shapes and sizes, from something like 4 properties that we've seen here, to an object of objects and arrays containing even some methods, some critical information, or maybe just even a lot of binary information or strings of text. But the methods and principles are fairly similar across the board when working with APIs. And for the most part, that's everything that is supposed to have been covered. So thanks for watching.